Welcome to the live stream. Check the timestamps if you're watching the replay. I will turn off Sleep Token. If you've ever been interested in some of my music, check out Sleep Token. Fantastic ambient metal band, but I might get copyright striked, so let's turn that off. Check the timestamps down below. We are doing a 1 to 2 hour talk on the sexual shadow. Last time, just a few days ago, we did our first live stream on the theme, and I didn't get shadow banned. The video did quite well. It seemed to have reached a large number of people, and I want to bring back the community to try and see where we can go specifically on the topic of relationships. If you've seen the community post from this week, you'll have seen that we're talking about The Invisible Partners by John Sanford. This is your recommendation for the week. Gentle Fritz, good to see you. See people coming in chat. Greetings, relax, I see you here. I see Casey in the chat. Welcome back. This is part 2 for The Invisible Partners, and this time around we're going to be focusing in on a variety of love addiction, romantic addiction, and maybe a few themes around love and limerence as well. But don't worry about these coming in too soon. Yep, see people in the chat. Shadow ban on shadow work. It is meta. Now, that was a concern. If you were here on Friday, I did the first sexual shadow live stream. I turned off monetization. I was extremely hesitant. If you watched that stream, at least half a dozen times throughout the stream, I was saying things like, I don't know if I can talk about this on YouTube because historically I have made videos related to sex and sexuality, and when I put the video out, my channel is then suppressed for months afterwards because unfortunately the algorithm does not know the difference between sexual mental health content and explicit adult material, which is a great shame. So today I'm going to be leaving all that in the past. I'm going to be going through with confidence, and hopefully we'll talk about some romantic shadow issues, how to have better relationships, how to bring out your trauma bonds and clear them out and get into more of a conscious relationship with your own sensuality, your own sexuality, and of course the kind of partnerships that you want to be in, whether you're straight man, straight woman, gay woman, wherever you are in the world. We're going to try and make it relatable, but on the interior psychological level. So hopefully we'll bring some people in on the community. As I mentioned, if you're watching this on the replay, then check the timestamps. You can skip straight towards where we're going. I have no idea where we're going in real time because it's going to be an hour and a half of figuring out where things are. But let's go into the chat. We're doing sexual shadow with focus on relationships. I see Relax saying, Limerence, yay, I wish I could stay longer, but I'll need to go later. Well, and then would you be talking about limerence, something I've been suffering from for a long time? Yeah, limerence seems to be the topic. Tell you what, let's go in straight away with the topic of limerence. I've prepared for this. Number 1 recommendation for the week is to read The Invisible Partners by John Sanford. This is a classic Jungian psychology take on the inner projective tendency of the romantic shadow. Why do you find someone attractive? What is it that sparks your interest? What is it that sets your candle alight? Usually, there's got to be a bit of a projection. Basic 2-minute summary of projection, if you're new to the concept. A projection is a way of closing psychic space. That's all it is. In your mind, imagine your mind being here at this point, and the outer world, including people, situations, and even ideas, is all the way out here. You're over here, this is over here. What do? You need to launch a projection to close the distance. A projection need not be positive or negative. It need not be going over the top towards a golden shadow or going underneath towards a more malevolent shadow. It can just be neutral. You can project neutrally through space. It's an automatic psychological process. You will never overcome the projective tendency. You have to do it. This plays into the romantic context in great significance because often we project way too much of a golden shadow, we fall in love with a fantasy, or we project too much of a demonization and we fall into hatred with an overly negative fantasy. This is more of a nightmare scenario. But in a neutral sense, psychologically speaking, you can't overcome the projective tendency because if you were walking down the street, think of this example, you're walking down a city street and there's no one around, and you see a group of 5 young men wearing hoodies. They're coming towards you. What do you assume? What do you project? You don't project that they're probably kindly, compassionate, well-meaning young gentlemen. Unfortunately, because you have survival responses inside of you, you're going to probably project 99% of the time, I should be careful here, at the very least. Maybe you'll overly project that they're bad news, especially if you have some kind of prejudice against men or some kind of racial prejudice. I'm not talking about the obvious problems with projecting towards a group of men. I'm saying at the base psychological level, as this relates to romantic projection later on, you will close the psychic distance between you and the 5 hooded men who are approaching you as an automatic psychological process, because it closes the gap between the two of you. It literally closes that gap. In the same way that if a kindly old lady was walking down the street in the middle of the day and she's got her little stroller, you are going to project across the gap based on your previous experiences, your understanding of human patterns, and your archetypal associations with a group of young men or elderly lady, what kind of person that could be. Of course, the young men could be on their way back from the charity orphan event and they've just donated £10,000 to help out the local hardships, or the elderly lady could be coming back from her 5th drunk driving accident of the day. We don't know. We don't know. But of course, we project based on reasonable tendencies of what that person might be like. Projection is an automatic process. This ties into what's going on in The Invisible Partners. Get this book by John Sanford. When you're romantically projecting, you're doing the same thing. You're closing the distance, right? That person looks particularly handsome or particularly beautiful. That person looks particularly ugly or disgusting. Baseline physical projection. It's always happening. That person looks particularly tall, particularly short. I have a preference for particularly tall, particularly short. That person has a certain kind of relational composition in terms of, I don't know, they walk in a certain way and you find that attractive and you pick that up in a split second. Or they carry themselves in a certain way and you also find that attractive. You pick that up in a split second. Or even in terms of the digital shadow, which is a whole other topic that relates into it, they post their stories in a certain way. They have a certain type of Instagram feed. Instant projections. The projection is launched to close the space between your inner reality and the outer world. But what happens when that starts to go wrong? Projection launches, it lands on a hook. I see people coming in the chat. Welcome if you're joining live. We're talking about projection and romantic shadow, and hopefully bringing you back to more of a conscious relationship. And then we're going to be talking about love and limerence in just a moment. Don't worry, we're going to go into that book in just a second. When you're launching romantic projections, you are launching your projection based on previous experiences and desired fantasies of what could come next if this goes in your favor. The problem with love and limerence is a term for compulsive romantic projection. If you're interested in why this book in particular, this is the original book by Dorothy Tenoff, who coined the term limerence, I believe in 1976. Let's see if I'm right. Sometimes it's a fun game I like to play. 1979, right there. 1979, I got the 9, flipped it around on the 6. My brain recalled the shape, but yeah, 1979. 1979 is when the term limerence was coined by Dorothy Tenoff. This is the original book. If you haven't read this book, and you're interested in going through romantic projection and limerence psychology, stop watching YouTube videos about the topic and go towards the original master work. There's an incredible variety of quite valuable, right here, the extracts are quite literal. Cheers out. Trying to avoid the candle so I don't burn the page. It's on theme. It's on theme. It goes into detail about sexuality. Dorothy Tenoff, Love and Limerence. Get this 50-year-old book if you want to go behind romantic fantasy projection, and also pick up this book. These 2 books will do more for you than any YouTube video. You could in fact stop watching the live stream and just read these books, and I guarantee you'll get a better educational experience. No word of a lie. We'll go back in on romantic projection, give you something practical, right? Give you something practical to be able to move from compulsive romantic projection and overly idealizing your romantic partner or potential romantic partner to having more of a grounded understanding of what's happening in your psychology and what the realistic assessment of the outer world might actually be. There's a few things you can do practically. I see people coming in the chat, and hopefully this topic is landing. Just let me know in the chat if you want me to keep going further on this idea of limerence and romantic projection. If you're enjoying this chat, just give me a pine tree emoji or some kind of thumbs up, right? Just let me know so I can see as the chat's streaming in. Practically, if you want to overcome limerence, what you need to do is understand your historical conditioning. This is something that I had to learn firsthand in terms of removing myself from pornographic fantasy, in terms of quitting that kind of substance. It's been 5 years since I've used that kind of adult material. You have to understand the limerence and the romantic projection behind the scenes of what you hope the desired romantic partner is going to give you. In my case, for example, I had to understand my historical conditioning about what I hoped a new female partner would bring for me, what I hoped a woman would bring for me at a fundamental level, what I hoped the feminine would bring for me. If you're a straight man or straight woman, and if you have a classic sexual orientation in terms of your overall energetic makeup, you will desire the complementary opposite. Most men desire a feminine partner, most women desire a masculine partner. Even within gay relationships, there's different dynamics at play, but for the sake of simplicity, for a live stream that's going to talk to a couple hundred people, maybe a couple thousand people, I'm just going to go with the straight examples. I've worked with gay clients, there's some differences in there, but I can't do everything every minute for every single person. So if you are someone who has a different sexual preference, just fill in the gaps and also read the books. You'll be able to piece together the material and do it in your own way. For the sake of simplicity, assuming the straight example, most men will project their ideal aspirations of what the feminine, capitals the feminine, could bring towards them. Most women will project and fantasize of what the masculine can bring towards them. A layer beneath that, it's the man, the woman. A layer beneath that, this man, this woman, right? You're following me here. When you're focusing on your baseline experience of limerence and romantic projection, you get caught up on the particular man or particular woman that you keep romantically projecting towards, or maybe the archetype of a particular man or particular woman. Maybe you're a woman who really likes sporty guys, or really likes nerdy guys, or really likes men who are really family oriented, or maybe they have a certain religious background. That's the archetypal constitution. Same for men. Maybe you have a particular archetype of the arty girl, the spiritual girl, the homemaker. Again, religious background, whatever it might be. Archetypal influence. Usually, at this band, you will be primarily caught in a compulsive loop of fantasy projection and disappointing reality, right? You've probably experienced this before. You've probably experienced it before. Because you're tied in on the archetypal overall feel of a certain type of man or woman who would make all your dreams come true, you find a particular man or a particular woman, and they seem to have the archetype that you're projecting, right? See it this way. This is the archetypal reality, a certain type of man or woman. For example, I'm going to go with the example, I don't know, let's go for the sporty guy, the athletic guy. Super easy, like most women are attracted to some degree for a man who's in shape and has good physical conditioning and has good kind of body composition and good energy levels. Most women find that attractive, right? It's a good example to go with. The athletic man, as an archetype, will then have within it particular men who are athletic men. You'll then launch your projection towards that one particular athletic man, or an athletic woman if you're a man watching this, an athletic woman, that might be your archetype. You launch it towards the particular because the particular is your promised gateway towards the archetypal whole. And that puts you in very, very, very dangerous territory. Let me explain why. You're layering on all of the hopes and dreams and full archetypal possibilities of the entire archetypal network onto one particular man or woman. And if you expand the range of perception, not just from the archetype of the athletic man or woman, but to masculinity or femininity as a whole, that's where we enter into anima and animus projection territory. You can see how the circles layer out. What's happening fundamentally when you're caught in something like love and limerence is that you are mistaking and confusing an individual person for the entire scaled out version of the archetype and then towards all of masculinity or all of femininity. You're basically trying to collapse everything that's above and beneath onto this singular figure. So no wonder it gets complicated, no wonder you become disappointed, no wonder as well the daydreams keep coming, no wonder as well you keep fantasizing, because there's a lot on the line. You're hoping that everything can be achieved by this one particular, but it's impossible, because no man or no woman has full access to the overall archetypal reality of all men, all women, or even a particular archetype at its fullness. You might hope that it has that, but if you see a man with a particularly nice pair of, I don't know, arms, or they've got a strong six-pack, don't launch the entire archetype when it's just one sign of them having some of that archetypal contact. I hope that makes sense. That was a long, drawn-out monologue on this idea of archetypal reality. Does this make sense? If you're watching this live, let me know in the chat. Can you see this distinction here that I'm bringing through of what's happening fundamentally with romantic fantasy projection is that you're taking a single individual and you're layering an entire archetypal reality onto them. I see Relax in the chat saying makes sense, so insightful. Nameless, no name says it does. Lupine says definitely. Cynical says yes. Yinglan says expertly explained. Cool. I'm glad I've explained that. I'll take a sip of my matcha and then we'll come back in. If you've got a question on this particular topic, how you'd like me to explain, again, going further on love and limerence and romantic projection, either share one of your experiences or read it out in the live stream or ask me a question that allows me to take it further. And then we can keep the conversation flowing as we talk about the sexual shadow and the romantic shadow. I see more support in the chat from Gentle Fritz and from Roya as well. Welcome back, you two. And Jamie says it makes sense as well. Some good support here. Robin says, I've done that in the past. Agreed. Absolutely. If someone asks me a question about where you want me to go on the love and limerence romantic projection side of things, now that we've filled out the basic reality, I'll be able to then bring a lot more in. Emmy says, yes, you're putting too much onto one person. It's like you can't really see them. You only see who you want them to be. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. You see who you want them to be, and primarily you see the archetypal reality that you want to be in contact with. Fundamentally, you're not seeking that man or that woman. You're seeking contact with the archetypal reality, which is a layer beneath. For me personally, one of the things that I learned probably, let's call it 6 years ago, roughly 6 years ago, 5, 6 years ago, I was doing some work on my old teenage sexuality patterns of the kinds of women that I found attractive, and I noticed that there were certain patterns which always came up. Historically, when I was more of a wounded man, I'd be interested in more of the wounded woman. I'd be interested in the hurricane woman, the kind of woman who was high highs, low lows, all kinds of emotionality, all kinds of intensity, because I confused emotional intensity and emotional volatility for emotional intelligence. Right? I used to confuse that, wow, she feels so much, so intensely, and oh, she's devastated. That must mean that she's emotionally intelligent. It actually meant that she's emotionally dysregulated, but on the outer side, I guess I found that fascinating and interesting because I have more of a narrow range of emotional expression, or at least I did back then in my teenage years, my earlier time. For me to understand what was happening with my romantic fantasy projections, stripping back from the hurricane woman, from the overly emotionally extreme woman, to strip that back, I realized that what I'm really searching for is emotionality and sensuality. This is what came through in the live stream just 2 days ago, the difference between sexuality and sensuality. And over the last half a decade or so, as I've gotten deeper in contact with my own sensuality, expanding my range of joy and euphoria at the top end, and really going deeper into the darkness, the heaviness, and the lower states at the bottom end, and in a sustainable way between the two, there's not the romantic fantasy projection towards a wild hurricane woman anymore. It just doesn't happen. I see the trauma behind the pattern. The high highs and the low lows, the classic toxic relationship dynamics. It's no longer appealing, it just seems dangerous. You don't want to go and drive into the center of a hurricane or go and jump into an exploding volcano. It's just no longer attractive, because what I had to do for myself personally, and hopefully this principle applies to your relationships, is understand the archetypal whole which I was placing any individual into. Of course, you may have preferences towards certain archetypal leanings. For example, you could be a woman who's really attracted to men who are successful in business or successful in their careers, and they've got a certain level of power and status, and you find their responsibility and their ability to influence and control and lead Very attractive, very classic masculine traits. Most women find that attractive to some degree, whether it's in the world of business or in the world of the home or in the world of spirituality and sensitivity and artisticness. If they've got that quality, you might find it attractive. But to then understand that the archetypal whole has many gradations of healthiness or unhealthiness, depending on, are they controlling and manipulative and abusive, or are they in control for the good of the people they're here to help? Huge differences. Huge differences. You can strip back the archetypal reality, and then you can get discerning about the health or lack of health on any particular individual's reflection or embodiment of the archetypal whole. It really helps. I'll come back in on the chat now, have a look what people have been saying. Let's see where we should take the conversation even further. And thank you as well. If you're joining me live, this is the second live stream this week, and I'm enjoying talking about relationships because I think it's a week for it, and also quite practically, this Invisible Partners book is something that I want you to read. I see Emmy saying you're putting too much onto one person. It's like you can't really see them, you only see who you want them to be. Exactly, it's wishful thinking. I see Cynical saying, do you think it works the same for same-sex attraction, i.e. females attracted to females? My experience working with lesbian clients has been that depending on their preference, in terms of them being the more dominant or the submissive partner, that can then change things. My literal experience working with gay and lesbian individuals is that usually the partnership will split towards a more dominant person and a more submissive person, or maybe in overly simplified language, the more masculine woman, the more feminine woman, and they tend to be the way that gay relationships, it tends to be the way. Even if it's a 60%, 40% split, there's usually an energetic difference between the one who's more comfortable taking the control, taking the lead, more masculine qualities, and the one who's more receptive and more willing to go with the flow, or maybe softer. It's very overgeneralized, but I've yet to see an exception in the gay men and women that I've worked with. But of course, that's a topic in itself. So I will focus in on the wider picture just for now. Seeing a few people coming in now on the chat. It's Carolina says, or Carolina said, it makes sense. It can also be difficult to be the one who is the object of projection. For sure. If you've ever been the object of someone's projection, someone's fantasizing on you and they're painting you as the pedestalized image, you are in a very uncomfortable position. Because guess what? You're still human. You know you're human. You know that your farts still stink. You know, excuse me, that you burp on live streams. You don't smell like sugar, spice, and all things nice. It's, it's difficult when you're being overly pedestalized, because often you realize in those relationships, they're not even seeing me. They're not even dating me. They're dating the archetypal image, or they're fantasizing at the mental level with the archetypal image. They're not actually here. So it's quite difficult. Someone says, will I be going more into anima and animus? Sure, might do some of that in this live stream. Relax said, I'd love to share my personal situation if anyone else would help. Real life people feel boring to me compared to my limerent objects. It's really difficult to be attracted or interested in anyone real. That's a classic pattern. It sounds like you're caught on the archetypal world rather than the material world. Hopefully we'll come back into that one. I see Nameless No Name. I've been porn free for a year, which has been a real eye-opener. It's been hard, brackets pun intended, very good pun. I'm still trying to work out how it helps or hinders my relationships with my partner and other women. Might come back into porn a bit later on. I also see 10 euros in the chat from Initiate. Nice super chat, thank you. I see your super chat here. You are a legend. Your book recommendations help me a lot, thank you. Thank you so much for the 10 euros. That is about as much as I need to buy a book secondhand, so the next secondhand book for the library is on you, and I appreciate that one right there. Got a few more chats in here. What does it mean when a man is highly explosive? From Sephora. And we've got some invisible partners. We've got some abusive and violent marriage here. I'm sorry about this, but you're saying Peaceful Phoenix. I'm healing from 3 years of abusive and violent marriage. I'm separated and working on myself, but these days I'm constantly wishing that someone could save me. How do I stop the limerence? And then some destructiveness here. So I suppose, highly explosive and aggressive. We've got 2 questions there about male aggression and violence from men in relationships. So I suppose we'll go out here on this topic. You know what, I'm going to open it up. So I appreciate that you're asking about a particular relationship, but to make this relevant for everyone, what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about abusive relationships in a broader sense, so that even my straight male viewers who date women can probably relate through things like verbal abuse or emotional abuse, which is far more common than most men would dare to admit. Emotional manipulation is a big thing that goes on quite often in the male experience of being in a female relationship, particularly for men who be watching videos or live streams like this, because we're more conscious men, and sometimes we can be caught up in more unconscious relationships. So the classic split is that usually there'll be more verbal violence in terms of both a woman receiving verbal violence, unfortunately, and a man receiving verbal violence, but oftentimes the physical violence aspect or the financial controllingness can be more of a woman's experience, whereas men tend to just get a lot more berating and all kinds of chaos comes through. It's difficult. To some degree, there's gender-specific challenges within abusive relationships. For the sake of this live stream, I can see a few questions coming in about aggressiveness and explosiveness. I'll talk about the psychology of what's happening in toxic relationship dynamics and what you can do to hopefully minimize the frequency of these relationships or get over a previous abusive situation. That sound good? We'll do something like this. Again, there's about 100 people watching live, so I'm trying to make it relevant for the rough 50-50 split of men and women that we have watching these live streams. Let's try and do something practical. When I've supported men and women in healing from previous abusive relationships, it's usually the case that we have to do a lot of work around. There's a lot of work to be done. It depends on if it's 6 months after the relationship's ended or if it's 6 years after the relationship's ended. One of the major pillars that always needs to be focused on is something like restoring self-trust in terms of your ability to choose correctly, right? It's to find a way to believe in your ability to see through illusions and make better choices to not put yourself in a dangerous situation ever again. That tends to be a very, very important pillar in terms of healing from abusive relationships and creating a situation where you know that you'll be safe in your next relationship. If you've experienced verbal violence, or you've experienced someone who talks down to you, who shouts at you, who threatens you, or, God forbid, people who've had physical or sexual, I don't want to say the word just because I'm on YouTube, physical or sexual, I don't want to add the words in together, but violence, just because of the YouTube algorithms. If you've experienced these things, you obviously got into a situation where things fell to shit and it was fucking awful and you're out of the situation now. The main thing that I want you to have is the ability to never step into that situation again. To do that, you need to understand books like The Invisible Partners and books like Love and Limerence. And here's the third book that I'm going to recommend for the live stream. This is really practical. It's more than I can do in a single live stream because I'll work with clients for 4 months on these topics sometimes. I can't do that much in just 15 minutes on a live stream. Diane, this is a Q&A question, yes. Pia Melody, Facing Love Addiction. Screenshot this book. 3, 2, 1, this book. These 3 books together will help you to properly discern for the future how to choose a healthy, safe partner. Classically, women who get into physically abusive relationships will misconstrue or not properly discern the difference between a man who is in control and a man who is controlling. They won't properly discern between an assertive man and an aggressive man. They won't properly discern between a bold, courageous, independent man and a detached, cold, isolated man. A man who doesn't care what happens to you. On the other end of the example, this is where the lack of discernment comes in. A man, as I mentioned earlier, who is interested in the hurricane woman, or the girl who likes partying, or the girl who's up and down, emotions always changing, she hasn't really got any stability. He's confusing emotional intensity with emotional, well, let's call it emotional intelligence at the very least, but emotional intensity as being basically the pinnacle of the value system of what a woman could bring to you, whereas actually you're confusing intensity for safety and based on your personal childhood conditioning. Usually it's the case that your mother or father probably had the same high highs, low lows pattern, and you have it on repeat. It's just a mistaken thinking early on. I see in the chat, Facing Love Addiction by Pia Melody. Yes, that's the book. If you have a historic pattern of over-exaggerating the qualities of a partner and entering into a relationship with someone who's no good for you, and you know this has happened before, your number one thing to do is to take things slower when you're getting into new relationships to make sure that you're not entering into another abusive dynamic. Usually, for most people, this will mean a pendulum swing towards reservation. You'll be a little bit more reserved, you'll be a little bit more lean back, you might ask a few more questions, you might be scanning for the red flags. But unfortunately, you can't see everything up front. You need a bit of time to be with someone. But if you do the trauma work and clear out the old wounds, the old pain points, the old lacerations, you then have the ability to feel the new ones when they start to happen. I'm going to give you a metaphor, right? Say, for example, you've got a cut on your hand, got a cut like this. If you don't bandage the wound properly, and it's always bleeding, you've always got blood on your hand from that previous abusive relationship. So, when there's blood on your hand and blood in your palm, you go on the second date with someone new, you're holding their hand, there's two situations that could happen. If you've already healed, and there's no more blood leaking out of you, you've got a clean palm. So when you go into that new date, and you hold their hand, and you come out and go, wait a minute, there's blood all over my hand. You feel it, you see it, it's that obvious. There's wounding, there's trauma, there's something that's unsafe here. If you don't bandage the wound from the past and it's still bleeding into your palm, when you go on the date, guess what? You don't notice that more blood's been added. You're not yet attuned to the repeated wounding that's going on unless you've taken the time to spend time out of a relationship and reflect properly on what's happened in the past. That's the general advice that works for most people. I hope that metaphor lands. I'm making it up in real time. I've never said that before, but it seems to be appropriate enough. Just take the time out. Take the time out and learn to discern the patterns, which is partly an intellectual exercise for people who are joining live. I will bring up the 3 books I've just recommended. Invisible Partners by John Sanford. This will help you with romantic projection. Love and Limerence by Dorothy Tennov. This is the original 1979 book where limerence was termed. It's another term basically for romantic projection. This is the classic book that I want you to read. And again, Pia Melody's Facing Love Addiction. These 3 books together are the 3 recommendations for today. If you're joining live. If you're watching on the live stream replay, you might be thinking, why does Jordan keep repeating himself? It's because roughly on YouTube live streams every 5 minutes, the audience refreshes by like 25 to 40%. So some of you will be watching all the way through, and I appreciate you being here with me. Maybe you're cooking or stretching or out for a walk and you like listening in real time. Most people are kind of dropping in and dropping out, so that's why I repeat myself, just so you know what happens on YouTube live streams and what my experience is like as a curator and a teacher. I need to be aware of the dynamics. It's like imagine being in a lecture hall. Currently I can see there's over 100 people here. My experience energetically is that I'm at the front, and every few minutes people are coming in and leaving, and I'm still speaking to 100 people at once, and I'm kind of like giving little invitations and reminders of this is what we did 20 minutes ago. It's not because I think you're dumb. If you've been here for the last half an hour, it's not because I think you're dumb and you've forgotten, even though I've held it up 3 times. It's just, just allowing the new people to calibrate. But I'm enjoying the conversation. I'm enjoying talking about love and limerence, and hopefully for anyone who's been in an abusive relationship dynamic, the one metaphor that I want you to remember: if you've got blood in your hand, it's harder to identify when more blood's being added. If you've healed the wound, you've got a clean palm, you'll notice it right away. You'll feel it. You'll feel it in your heart. It's not about the blood on the palm. You'll feel it in your heart. You'll feel it also in your lower areas. You'll feel it in your upper areas. You'll get a full, triple indication towards what's happening. I hope that helps. Take a sip of my matcha. Gonna go back on the chat, and if you're joining in real time, how are you finding this second sexual shadow live stream? It's the kind of things we're talking about in the Shadow Work Library. The link is down in the description if you love what I'm talking about here. You can sign up for my $6 free newsletter email list and consider joining us in private community. Our next live group call is happening in 2 hours. Exactly 2 hours from now, 7 o'clock UK time, we've got an hour and a half seminar. and I think there's going to be a nice full classroom in there. So if you enjoy talking about these topics, come join a group of pretty intelligent, pretty inquisitive individuals inside the Shadow Work Library, and you're welcome to join. Now is the best time to join. We're having exceptional, high-level conversations over there. Yeah, just have a look. Link in the description. Don't waste this opportunity. Let's go back and have a look on the chat. If I missed your question from earlier on, I do apologize. We've got over 100 people watching live, so it's obviously difficult to track every single contribution. Seeing now in the chat. From New Life Bitch. What about a man who continues to be led exclusively by the current partner into decisions which may be good, but he doesn't discern for himself? I am worried I am his latest leader. Lots of pressure. I don't quite understand your question. If you come back in, I might be able to answer your question. Can you rephrase that in a way that I could then talk on it, please? I see Casey. Refreshing to have you discuss this topic. It's so important and difficult to navigate through, even years later. Great analogy. Larissa says that's a great metaphor for it, with the blood on the hand. Having learned this the hard way, it definitely resonates, and a good pine tree in there. I like to see a good pine tree. Lupine, thank you for being here. Sapora, I see you in the chat. What if you're one of those relationships but afraid to leave due to a sense of scarcity of interaction or people to reach out due to living farther from towns and people? If you're saying that you're in an abusive relationship and you're asking, what should I do if I'm afraid to leave? There's many channels on YouTube that talk about things like the narcissistic abuse dynamics or the relational abuse dynamics, and I imagine you found some of these already, but I recommend that you go and watch that material and make up your mind, or also just snap through it and do the loving thing for yourself, which is to leave a situation which is bleeding all over you. It might be difficult. It will almost certainly be difficult, especially if there's dependencies, but this is the rest of your life that we're talking about. So, don't hurt your inner child and don't suffocate your soul anymore if now is the time to leave a bad relationship. I see Jamie in the chat. I know I'm supposed to be here today after talking about blood on the hand. Thank you, Jordan. You're welcome. I've got a general question. I'm not going to do general questions today. We're going to focus in on relationship shadows only. I see Hannah. I've been single for so long that I sometimes find myself thinking my future spouse has to be so amazing to justify the wait, and I wonder if it's a form of projection or hope to keep me going. This is a good situation. Okay, we're going to go there. And I'm going to come in on Daniel's chat. Daniel's question in the chat, which are some big questions to be asking early on to getting to know someone and how to avoid a mismatched relationship. Okay, we've got two questions there. We've got basically two sides of the same coin. If you're somebody who's been working on themselves, here we go. Wait, justifying the wait. Okay, so I'm going to weave two questions together in real time. You're somebody who's doing the inner work. I think that's fair to say. You're watching this live stream. You're somebody who's doing the inner work. You've been healing the trauma of the past for however many months or however many years. You've been reading the kinds of books I've been recommending on this channel. You are improving your relationship with yourself, and you're in that waiting period in between. You're out of a bad relationship. You're not quite into the new relationship. You're in the rebuilding, restructuring, and healing period in between. That's the first basic premise here. And then as Daniel asked in the chat, Daniel said, what are some big questions to be asking yourself early on in getting to know someone based on the books above to avoid a toxic or mismatched relationship? Let's go for a higher level answer. What would I say to someone if they wanted to screen? To avoid a mismatched relationship, you have to be 90% clear about your personal values in relationship. That's a basic foundation. Putting a mint in my mouth to cool down the heat that's coming up. In fact, I might even take off my... Yeah, take this off. There we go. Bring it down. Okay, the heat is rising. We're going to do a conversation. You need to know your relational values. Practically speaking, it's actually about consciousness. Every single person who's watching this channel, every single person who's in the live stream, I guarantee that you're smarter than the average person. I guarantee that you're probably more spiritual than the average person. I guarantee that I can't guarantee this one. There's a high probability that you're more creative or more artistic or more sensual than the average person. These are baseline values that you might be blind to because you are these things. Excuse me, I'm just rolling up my sleeves so I can get a nice Nice feeling of openness. You might be blind to the fact that you are above average. And as brutal as this might be, because you are above average in terms of your consciousness at an overall superficial level, doesn't mean that you're the God's gift to the next man or woman that you date, but you're above average. You need to look out for the signs of below average consciousness, or at the very least, just average consciousness. Some classic telltale signs: substance usage. Substance usage is usually the biggest telltale sign. What someone chooses to put into their body, put into their body, or put into their body. Or even if they're going on adult websites and they're consuming the material on the phone, what they're putting into their body via all of the incredible men and women that they're looking at doing naked things on the internet. Look out for the substance usage issue, because you might be blind to it. And this is the distinguishing factor, right? If you're in the waiting period in between, if you've been working on yourself and you've been healing, you might not realize how far you've come along the journey because you've been walking step by step, right? You're the same person you were 6 months ago and 1 year ago to some degree on the inside, but you're not. You've been advancing up the ladder of consciousness. Imagine that you're climbing up the ladder of consciousness. There's 50 rungs on that ladder. You started this journey 20 rungs deep, maybe 25 rungs deep. Let's call that the average level of consciousness. Maybe actually average level of consciousness is like 10 rungs deep. You're climbing and climbing and climbing. Bad relationship fell off, and then you've just naturally been climbing. You need to know and have the ability to be able to quickly identify, that person's down here, that person's up there. Oh wait, they're not actually that high, that's just my romantic projection. They're actually down here. Or maybe they are just a little bit higher. There's a felt sense of clarifying your own consciousness and your own value system based on you taking some time to just sit down and reassess how far you've come. It's a really overly complicated answer, but I think I'm talking to a more advanced group of people on these live streams, so I'm trying to give you a more advanced answer. There will be telltale signs of someone being at an average level of consciousness, which you should look out for, because very rarely, very, 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 very rarely, are there exceptions to the rule. If you start dating someone and they're still smoking cigarettes, they're still getting drunk on a weekly basis, they've got a problematic relationship with recreational drugs, they've got a problematic relationship with pornography, they've got a problematic relationship with their parents, and it's not even the case that, you know, they're healing some things from the past, or there's major abuses, there's constant gossip and drama, there's things that are always going on. These are all telltale signs that they're on that average band of consciousness, and the average band of consciousness by default is no trauma work, very little self-development, and often very little critical self-reflection. There might be performative moments where someone picks up a Christmas bestseller and it's a how to win friends and influence people kind of book. Just watch out for your shadow projections. If you like books like this, you like the kind of classic self-development book, like How to Win Friends and Influence People, or, you know, someone's reading The Power of Now, or The Untethered Soul, or The Four Agreements, or they picked up a copy of The Body Keeps the Score because they saw it trending on TikTok. You might think, as you're climbing up the ladder, wow, they read The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. They must be as into trauma work as I am. They're probably not. They're probably not. I've seen this over and over and over again in client work. The golden shadow projection, the romantic fantasy hopefulness because you see one sign of them being into trauma healing, or they went to one workshop, or they happened to listen to one podcast, or maybe they're 2 months clean from cigarettes but they've got 20 years deep. It's not enough for this next relationship for you. You've already had the crappier relationships, you've already had the healing relationships. You've reached a certain standard of consciousness. At that standard, make sure you're with someone who's at the very least kind of in the same band. Maybe 1 or 2 rungs lower on the ladder, 1 or 2 rungs down, or 1 or 2 up, roughly in the same band. If you pause and reflect on how far you've climbed, how well you've done, and those kinds of habits and routines that you've put in place to get you to this stage on the ladder, it's just a metaphor. I know there's different hierarchies, I'm just giving a metaphor for teaching's sake. But how high you are on the ladder, you'll be able to really see the band that they're in. Don't get confused. Don't do the white knight syndrome, bring someone up all the way from the down. You're like, oh, you find a girl and she's smoking and drinking and her family is in arguments all the time. And you're like, I'm gonna reach down into the depths of their despair and pull them up and put them on the ladder. Guess what fucking happens? They get to the ladder and they're like, I don't like it up here, it's too high, I'm not ready for this, and they're going to put themselves right back down. They're going to go all the way back down. They're going to bring themselves back down to the level they're comfortable with, and vice versa. If you overly project that someone's actually much further ahead than they are, guess what happens when you start trying to have a conversation with them up here? Literally imagine this. Energetically. New relationship. You've overly pedestalized them. You've put them higher than yourself. Even higher than this. If you're talking up here and you're saying, my darling, I love you so much. We're building the new conscious relationship for the future. I can't wait to build this incredible intentional relationship. And you're talking up here, but there, down here, you're actually talking at this volume. My darling, I can't wait to... They can't hear you. They can't hear you talking because you're not talking at them. You're talking in a fucking different direction. An entirely different direction. They're not there yet. And also you're confusing yourself because, you know, you're not there yet, or you're overly identifying towards them when actually you want to be going towards your own higher aspirations. You're inflating and directing. The energy's going outwards in a diagonal line towards something that doesn't exist. You're trying to talk to someone who's here, but you're projecting and it's missing them. It's not going in their ears, it's not connecting with them eye to eye, and also you're not really dating a real person, you're just projecting towards the archetypal image. This is what goes back earlier on. So to bring back the two questions of what do you do when you're in the waiting period, and justifying, am I just waiting because realistically, I haven't found anyone just yet? Or are you waiting because you've got a good sense of where you're at on that ladder of consciousness? You've got a good feel for people who are in your general area, and you know that based on your current life situation, there's not enough people who are around just yet. Not enough people who are around just yet. Try and discern it for yourself. Let's go back in on the chat. See, Relax saying, Jordan, doesn't that make it even more difficult to find someone aligned when he has such high standards? The truth is most people are not like that. I see why that can open us up to Limerence also. It's true. It's true. Most people are not at higher bands of consciousness by default. You'll see over here. My library's a little bit lopsided currently because I've got a book list video that I'm planning on doing. Rather than doing that today, I thought I'd do an hour and a half, maybe 2 hour live stream, who knows. Rather than doing a classic YouTube video, doing a live stream instead. But the library's a little bit messy. Here are 25 weird books that I'm gonna eventually put on the channel. Over here, we've got the integral psychology shelf. This is all consciousness studies. And through various studies from roughly the 1960s onwards, Ken Wilber being a major figure, but also other systems like spiral dynamics or transpersonal psychology in general, the general estimate of top-tier consciousness, integral level consciousness, is less than 10% of the population. And more realistically, in terms of trauma work within that 10% of consciousness, you're looking at about 3 to 5% of the population throughout an entire lifetime. An entire lifetime. If you're dating in your 60s and someone's had more time to reflect on the damage of their past and become an individuated person, you might have an easier time finding higher consciousness, but of course there's relational challenges in terms of blended families or in terms of what's happened with maybe sickness or health, especially if people get older, their 60s, their 70s, it can be harder to date, but at least the consciousness will have raised because they've had more time to be able to work on their consciousness. My brutal observation in terms of someone like yourself who wants to enter into a conscious relationship is that in terms of general population, you are looking for, at the very least, a 1 in 200 person. 1 in 200. It's not 1 in 50. It's not 1 in 100. You're looking for someone who's a 1 in 200. If you've become a 1 in 200, and this is where we need to do some real shadow work, are you really that high quality a person? You might say, yes, of course I am. You might say, no, actually I'm not. Either of them could be inflated. You could be artificially deflated towards a shame-based psyche where you're overly critical of yourself. You can be overly optimistic and say, you know what, I am the grandiose individual. Any man or woman that I choose to date is truly blessed to be with me. I don't know. That's on you. Are you a 1 in 200 person? Actually 200 people. Like you take 400 people, 200 men, 200 women. In that group of people, average consciousness, roughly in like the next, like 10 years, let's say 10 years younger, 10 years older, you've got 20-year age span. Are you actually at the pinnacle in that 1 in 200 or even in the top group? How valuable are you in the dating market? It's super bold. And you might say at the spiritual level, we're all deeply valuable. I agree. In terms of the intrinsic value and lovability of the soul, every human being is immensely valuable. But we're not talking about the sacred semantics of soul, divine value. We're talking about your ability to show up in relationship based on the various things you could contribute, the various things that you are, and the essence energetically that you have to be able to share in a relationship. If you're at the top tier, and you're watching a video like this, you're going to find it very difficult to find someone else who is top tier unless you get yourself out there in terms of social media, usually in terms of international reach, because then you'll have an international audience, or putting yourself into very conscious circles in your city of choice, which usually means things like healing workshops, things like yoga studios or alternative sporting things, or maybe certain craft situations like art fairs, that kind of stuff. The dating market value question is very subjective and it's a very complicated topic, but in a simple level, are you a 1 in 200 person? Compared to average consciousness, that's for you to decide. If not, maybe you're a 1 in 100 person. Or maybe this is a moment where you realize, you know what, I am still smoking and drinking. I'm not doing very well in my career, if I'm honest. I'm not making that much money. In fact, I'm making a lot of money, but I hate my work. That's another low status thing, from my perspective anyway. From my perspective, low status on the inside, the feeling of self-love and self-confidence, you could be making multiple 6 figures per year, but if you hate your work, you don't find it meaningful, and therefore it's not very attractive energetically in a dating context. It might be attractive at the superficial level, but in terms of the inner experience of being an attractive man or woman, if you identify as making a lot of money but you don't love the work, it doesn't actually land in terms of high consciousness relationship. You'd be better off making half the amount of money or a quarter of the money, if that's what would work, if you really love the work in terms of dating options, right? Men and women love somebody who really loves what they do. Like, they love it. They love it. Someone who spends 30, 40, 50 hours per week doing what they really love doing, what they're meant to do every single day of the week, that's a path of passion and purpose. It could be a more conventional job. Someone could absolutely love accounting, but they're genuinely passionate. They love the spreadsheets. And when they talk about it, their heart's on fire. That is something which really does raise the standards. And again, this is why it's 1 in 200 people. The 1 in 200 person, who is this person? Who is the top tier 1 in 200 person that you could be, and the kind of top tier 1 in 200 person that they could be? It depends on your preferences. There are a few commonalities, 2 commonalities. I see Crisis Core saying, I do not see the gender binary as an absolute. That's your perspective. From my perspective, I do believe that there are only men and women, and that is my quite strong belief, which is why I only talk about men and women on this channel, although there's a big difference in terms of straight and gay relationships and all kinds of sexual preferences, but in terms of the sexual baseline, there are men and women in the psychosomatic. Anything else is encouraging a dissociative narrative where mind, soul, and body are somehow fragmented and disconnected, and if there isn't somehow a great significance on our biological composition and our psychological composition, then I believe that we're all quite confused to believe the contrary. But that's another aside. I can respect that people have different perspectives, but I definitely do not have that perspective. So I might not be the channel for you, or I might not be the person to give advice for you based on your preferences, and that's okay as well. In terms of going further with the high quality men and women, let's come back in. I'm just scanning the chat, see if we want to go in on how do we know. Yeah, how valuable am I? See that in the chat. How do I know if I'm high self-worth? Cool. Yep, there we go. So we'll come back in on the 1 out of 200. You need to catch your own projective fantasies of your own self-worth. That means artificially low self-worth, artificially high self-worth. Get yourself grounded in the center. If you are grounded in the center and you've got a good objective understanding of your mental health, your spiritual health, your physical health, your career success, your personal relationships, Your overall intelligence in terms of your psychological intelligence, your emotional intelligence, your spiritual intelligence, your musical or artistic intelligence. If you know that you're very high across the board, you might be that 1 in 200 person. If not, bring yourself down a bit, you're overly inflated. And this answers a question from about 20 minutes ago. What do you do if you're in that waiting in between stage? How do I know if I'm waiting in between and it's just an excuse? Bringing it all back in now. If you're waiting in between and you're genuinely a very high quality individual and you're genuinely looking for another very high quality individual, holistically high quality, it's going to take time. If you're looking for a life partner to build a family with and you're looking for a multi-year committed partnership, it's going to take time. I haven't seen many exceptions. Maybe there's miracle scenarios of meeting someone by chance or by fate, but most people that I've worked with, it's taken them a long time because it takes time to find someone who's rare. It also took time to make you a rare person. That's okay. I see Laura in the chat. I've met great people at museums. People who pay money to go and stand quietly and contemplate are usually 1 out of 200. I agree. I agree on that one. Yeah. Coming in the chat, just reading the chat now if you're wondering where I'm at. I see Connie saying just in time to drop into a juicy topic. P.S. There is a difference between sex and gender. Connie makes a wise point there. It's definitely a much deeper conversation than I can bring out on a single live stream while trying to progress things further on this particular topic in a practical way. I see Belle saying, thank you for helping me understand. I'm in my early, it's wow, I better mingle. I see my partner has stories of past partners swaying him on big decisions, marriage and kids, moving house. Now I see him letting others, including me, influence instead of deciding for himself. I'm sorry to hear that. Let's bring this back in. I feel like we've lost the mark there. It's all right. It's a live stream. That's what happens in a live stream. We're 55 minutes in. Sometimes there's a messy middle. Just went on one conversational topic for about 25 minutes. So I'm going to take a little bit of a hydration break. There's several things coming up all at once. Practical advice. Practical advice rather than theoretical conversation. I'm interested in answering questions that would help you to have better romantic relationships. To wrap off on that question of, are you artificially waiting, or are you actually, patiently waiting for the right person? That depends on you having a healthy self-assessment of your actual capacity to be a high-quality partner for another high-quality partner. Might be a bit of honest shadow work. If actually you're overweight, you're underweight, you're untrained, you've got a poor career, your mental health isn't so good, you've still got trauma work to do, you're still hooked on addictions. There's things that you can do. I'm not hating you or shaming you, but if you do have work that you know you need to do, there's some things you need to put in place. Just do that for a few months more, and then go and see what the dating market looks like for you, or go and see the kinds of person that you're attracting, because energy has a resonance, right? And you'll be able to tell. Like I said, when we're doing the ladder climbing, you'll be able to see if someone's still hooked on the lower levels and not artificially project, and they'll likewise be doing it to you. So it all levels out the further you go on the journey. I see Relax saying in the chat, can you force attraction or connection? Let's say I am not 1 out of 200, but I want to be, and I'm introspective. I have work to do, but I'm working on it. What should I do in terms of dating? That's up to you. If you realize that you're a 1 out of 100 person, as crude as the system is, I'm a 1 out of 100 person. Top 1%, not top 0.5%, or you're a 1 out of 50 person, I'm the top 10%. Is that correct? Maybe. Maybe not. I don't think that's the correct mathematics. Whatever. You're not watching me for my calculations, you're watching me for psychological, metaphorical insights of one form or another. I don't think you can force a relationship with someone who's a higher quality than you. I don't think that you can force a relationship with someone who's lower quality than you. You instinctively know who's on your level, which is why quite commonly when you're having a conversation with someone in the early dating phases, you'll usually hear a statement, or you'll say this yourself, as you're sitting there and you're going for a nice kombucha because you don't drink, you're like, you know what? It's wonderful to finally talk to someone on my level. Or, you know what? It's wonderful to have a conversation on the same level. It's wonderful to connect with someone on the same level. One of you will say that. At some point in those first few interactions, one of you will say that. That's usually a very good indicator that you are probably on the same level, or just slightly off. One of you may pedestalize, the other may slightly lower. That's how we can practically find where things go. Question from Marcus. An individual realizes the reality of projection and unfairness of expecting others to fulfill needs, and their new approach becomes a detached asceticism that leaves the renouncing worldly affect. I don't know what that question is, my friend. I don't understand your question in the slightest. Can you rephrase that, please? Because it seems, yeah, I'm not sure how to. If you rephrase that, I'll be able to come back in. Please tell me how I can help you. Wordy Wizard says, how do you discuss healthy self-assessment with a new partner? You just do it up front. Just do it up front. If you've got a non-negotiable standard that I don't date people who drink and smoke and do drugs, and I'm not interested in dating someone who hasn't done foundational trauma work in terms of, basic psychological patterns or basic somatic disturbances, you can say this up front, or it's just obvious in terms of you not getting into those relationships to begin with. That's very much the dating phase. If you're one of these interesting inner workers, you just be direct. Just be direct. That's what I'll say. Cynical says, do you think we're only likely to attract people that match the level to which we've met ourselves? Yep, I think so. New Life Bitch says, does that mean he just isn't self-actualized? Would love some advice on what to do. Maybe he's just of lower quality. Well, this is where it's an issue. I see some different questions coming in of one person start leveling up. Yeah, and Justin said, I'll bring this in. Is it a common expression, a common situation where when someone starts doing the inner work and they start leveling up, they potentially outgrow the partner? Yes. You know that's common. Justin, you know this is what happens. You've experienced it. You don't need to ask me that question. You know that when you've been working on yourself, you outgrow a relationship, whether that's a friend or a romantic partner or even business connections. Of course. Most people stay roughly in a similar band of consciousness and they gradually grow maybe through their life. If you're on the inner work journey, you're like this, and they're like this, and you're growing and they're not. Super crude visual metaphor. It is one of the most common experiences. I don't think there's a single person in this live stream who hasn't outgrown a friend or a romantic relationship because they're committed to inner work. It's just the way of things. If you don't do the inner work and you don't go deeper onto the shadow side of things, you will be arguably in a better position to be able to connect with more people, but you won't be individuating in a truly authentic sense because you're not going as deep as you could go into your own journey. Marcus came back in with a question. Someone finds themselves lost, seeking asceticism for true comfort, but doubtful of this endeavor because of its spiritual basis. Love through the divine is different from worldly affection and bonding. I'm still not fully understanding your question because you're kind of you're doing a statement rather than asking it as a question, I'm afraid, unless I'm just dumb. Love through the divine is different from worldly affection and bonding. If you're asking, I don't understand how this is a question. Is love through the divine different from worldly bonding rather than seeking asceticism? Perhaps, yes. It's a very specific question, my friend. I'm not going to be able to answer this one and go into detail. I don't feel like it'll be the best one to go through on the live stream. But I appreciate the question nonetheless, and hopefully this doesn't come across as rude. I just don't understand what you're asking in enough detail to go on about 5 or 10 minutes on it. Rachel says, I struggle with the language, better than and on a higher level. We've also got to be careful not to swing to the side of condescension. Rachel, that is a great question. Thank goodness. Okay, we've got an anchor point. Cool. For about the last 7-8 minutes, I haven't had an anchor to be able to, you can see my energy, I've actually got an anchor to talk about how rude and how arrogant to say that you're better than someone else. How incredibly arrogant. Who are you to say in your next relationship, you know what, I'm cutting this off. I'm not going to go ahead with it, because you get that inner feeling based on having assessed your value system and what you have, and then kind of getting to know who they are, that you have that moment where you say, you know what, in terms of my spiritual work, in terms of my overall lifestyle setup, in terms of my physical, emotional, mental health, I am better than this other person. Isn't that condescending? Isn't that rude? Perhaps. But also, it's just true. You might be bullshitting yourself. You might be inflated. But objective reality assessment, there are 24 different factors of your life that almost have levels and lines attached to them. You know, you've got like dials on like a DJ deck, and they're all kind of raised up. You've got 24 different metrics. You can, if you are clear and have the ability to detach, like, you know what, objectively speaking, there's a mismatch. My dials generally level out here, their dials generally level out over here. Based on previous experiences, this is going to make me resentful. This is going to make me feel frustrated because they're not picking up the qualities that I kind of relate to, or they're not able to meet me on the level I want. This is a classic example, say, with baseline intelligence. If you're interested in reading books and you're the kind of person who reads 2 books per week, you can't date someone who doesn't read any books for a long-term period of time. They need to have the hunger to learn. It's not just about the books, it's about the intellectual appetite. The higher someone's intelligence, the more hungry they are to learn generally, because they've got that skill, and they've got that muscle, they've got that tendency to want to flex the intellectual muscle. So they're naturally going to learn over time. You might be thinking, Jordan, how fucking arrogant of you. I'm just sharing the truth. We're all here on this live stream. I have worked with dozens of very smart men and women who are very high-level individuals. And yeah, Rachel says there, they're not able to meet me on the level I want. That's true. They're not able to meet you on the level you want. They're also not able to meet you on the level you're at. Not just the level you want. You're on the ladder. You're at rung number 25 out of 50. You want rung 35. That's where you're aiming towards. That's where you're moving. You're actively climbing up the ladder. Objective reality assessment. They're 10 rungs below. I don't believe they're going to catch up. I don't even see them climbing or making an effort. Is this going to work based on the many metrics of time and consciousness and what happens when you outgrow people? I'm seeing this coming through in the chat. It's a good question. Well, have you had this experience of outgrowing people? I'm seeing Uma, I'm outgrowing some of my close friends and that transition is painful. And Jay says, I've started to outgrow friends who stopped learning when I turned 30. Yeah, I've outgrown friends. I'm seeing this coming through. Yeah, this is where we'll take the chat. Very common experience. Very common experience to outgrow friends and family members and romantic partners. Very common experience. You're not being condescending to call a spade a spade. It's an objective reality statement that there is such a thing as hierarchies of consciousness. If you read any Ken Wilber, any spiral dynamics, even David Hawkins with the levels of consciousness, there's different systems and maps in place to give you a rough indication towards these levels and layers. If you can be detached and discerning about your own development, and be honest about the ways that you still have to develop so you can be a higher quality person for a higher quality relationship, if you've built that inside yourself without a rigid, like, I'm better than everyone else, or oh, I'm so much worse than everyone else, I hate myself kind of psychology, you can then assess it in other people pretty quickly. And that's just a truthful way of interacting in relationships. Initiate says, should you distance yourself from those friends or try to maintain a relationship in new terms? My personal experience is the relationship falls apart. If you've outgrown friends that you went to high school with, you just outgrow and then you don't talk again. That's completely normal. I don't know why you would actively want to stay in contact with someone who you knew 20 or 15 or 10 years ago when you're on completely different levels. It makes no sense. You're struggling to force something to stay together. It's just very, very, very normal that this experience happens. I suppose maybe the conversation we're having here is that people who are very kind and compassionate feel like they're being rude or they're being mean or they, I don't know, who are you to cut off this relationship? Who are you? You think you're too good for us now. You know, your old high school friends or something like this. You think you're too good for us now. Yes, that's the reality. That's the choice that you're making. Be honest about it. On the inside, you don't need to communicate with them. You don't need to communicate on the outer stage. You don't need to say, like, yes, I am. You're at this level of consciousness. I'm at this level of consciousness. You can be kind and compassionate. But in terms of your inner fragmentation, I know 95% of the people watching this live stream, you've had at least one experience where you know on the inside, you feel it, you are better than this person. You've gone further than this person. Something's changed in your life. Don't fight against yourself and shadow box yourself and then be playing double guessing of, no, actually, I'm not so good. And like, just be confident with it and move on with your life and then be a better compatible fit to new friendships and new relationships of people who are also high confidence, also love themselves, also not shame-based. I'm giving the example at risk of being attacked, at risk of saying something that is socially taboo. But I see it as true. I have these conversations all the time in private client sessions with individuals who are in the safety of, this is a private confidential conversation. I hear it again and again and again, that when people are being honest with themselves, they outgrow old relationships. And of course, that means that they made a choice somewhere inside of them, or they just assessed how things were, that they are better than this old relationship. So feel free to declutter your relationships in that way. And if you are joining live, we've been now 70 minutes deep into a sexual shadow and relationship shadow conversation. It's interesting for me to do these conversations because you might have noticed that compared to the last live stream, where I was talking more about certain things related to, say, pornography, or we're talking about dynamics related to psychology, and even earlier in this live stream, when I'm talking about projective identification, because the world of relationships is so wide, and there are so many different men and women who'll be watching this across all age ranges with all kinds of preferences, it's very difficult to make a useful, insightful, broad video that also makes a particular marked point. It's why I stumble, it's why there's more hesitation in this, because I don't know where the anchor point is. I'm talking to a wide group of people right now. Whereas if I'm in a one-to-one conversation with someone, I know, oh, this is this particular woman at this particular age, and they're coming out of this type of relationship, or they're in this kind of marriage. Same for a man, oh, this is a man who's in his 40s, and he's in this kind of marriage, or this is a man who's in his 60s, and he's ended this marriage, and now he's got his grunge. I can calibrate the information. This is maybe a good moment of like my frustration coming out in real time of trying to learn how to do a live stream on relationship topics. Every relationship history is unique based on the man or woman who are in those relationships, and then the previous trauma history, the aspirations for what they want. So when I'm giving generic advice, even though I'm trying to be a bit higher level in it, it's not going to land for every person. Every bit of advice I give in this is going to fall flat and completely miss the mark for someone else. And you may have had moments when you're watching this where you're like, it's kind of Jordan's a bit weak on this point, or that's not really landing, or that's not, that's not for me. I know. It's because I can't calibrate with you as an individual perfectly. So it's an interesting challenge. It's an interesting challenge. I wouldn't give the same relationship advice to an 18-year-old man as I would to a 56-year-old married woman, and I haven't in the past, because they're in completely different situations. Completely different, which is why I've tried to focus on the bands of consciousness, because an 18-year-old man or a 56-year-old woman, they could be on the same band of consciousness depending on the life that they've lived. Right? 18-year-old man who started switching on when he was like 13, 14 and started meditating and trauma healing, and he's really, I don't know, whatever, really intelligent one way or another. 56-year-old woman who's been an addict for her life and been in an awful relationship and kind of played small. They could be on the same band of consciousness. Age isn't necessarily the metric to focus on. Younger people can be incredibly conscious, and older people can be incredibly unconscious. Makes it difficult to do a relationship live stream chat, but we're getting there. We are getting there. I'm seeing some love in the chat from Peaceful Phoenix. Thank you for hosting live streams on specific topics. I love it. Make 1984 fiction again. Perhaps a sidetrack, but last live stream you mentioned you had several books on conscious domination and submission. I'd be grateful if at some point you'll share what those are. Potentially. I'm not gonna go into BDSM and kink in this stream in particular. I know I said taboo topics, but again, that goes even more niche. There will be a book coming out in the next YouTube video when it goes up on the main page, which is on that theme, and I believe that is the best book on the topic. So stay in touch for that one. You'll see a good BDSM kink video inside of that. But I don't want to. I find it's interesting. It's interesting in this moment because I'm aware for the spectacular grandeur of the conversation around BDSM and more alternative sexual preferences in a YouTube live stream audience. It's easy to get lost. The nuance is easy to get lost. There's a chat that I'm then going to be responding to, and people have very, 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 very different belief systems and levels of awareness about what is and isn't right morally, or what is and isn't allowed, or if someone's got a trauma history, for example, and they're going into the BDSM space, that's a very different conversation from someone who's maybe healed their trauma history and they want to do something in a really safe and loving way. They're doing it with a long-term partner who they've been with for 5 years or 10 years, or they're going in spaces where it's a new partner every single week. They're very different things, and some things are more safe and some things are more unsafe than other things. It's hard to calibrate. But I'll maybe learn how to talk about these things more and more as the year goes on, in terms of bringing out more of the, this is the sex and love shelf. As you can see, the books are slightly slanted because I was recommending these books earlier. Maybe I'll be able to bring out more kink and things from a psychological, educational perspective of how to engage in these things in a way that's more conscious, but also it depends on the individual. I've worked with clients who are very alternative, they're very liberal, they have very certain types of relationships, and I can work with them based on what they need, what they want, and who they are as a person. I've also worked with men and women who are very conservative, who hate the idea of doing anything that's possibly taboo. And I can genuinely work with different types of people based on their preferences without overlaying my biases or overlaying certain assumptions and projections on my side. To a large degree, of course, projection will always have some kind of baseline. I'm always the same consistent factor. This is transference and counter-transference. But as an overall principle, my main value system is this conscious? Is this well thought out? Are you in contact with what your body and your soul actually needs and actually wants? And that's where I try and bring these conversations through, especially if it's an alternative dynamic of one form or another, or if someone wants to go into their own conventional relationship in one way or another. It's tough. It's tough. Again, I apologize, I can't be more specific and more in detail. If you ever want to try and figure out what it's like, try being on a live stream right now when you've got 136 people watching you, as I mentioned, going in and out of the lecture theatre, and you're trying to bring up a nuanced topic on sexuality to relate to a wide variety of people across like a 40-year age span. It's very, very challenging. Which is why, fun point, most of the dating coaches that you'll find on YouTube, they classify their audience into men or women. You've got some big dating coaches who'll only talk to women or only talk to men. That makes it a lot easier. That's why when I do YouTube videos, if I'm talking about sexuality, I'll try and this is advice for men and this is advice for women. It's very difficult. Otherwise you give generalized, kind of bland advice that's a bit too basic. And that's what I worry has come through on this live stream, but who knows, maybe I'm being a bit too... I know what's on the inside of me, and I know how much I've got in here, how much I've got in here, how much is here, and you might not get the, Jordan, I know how much I could bring through if I had the right kind of focus question. But ask me a focus question, let's see where we go. We'll do another 15, 20 minutes maybe. Let's go. Looking at the chat now. Pepsol says, which particular book do you recommend for someone that deals heavily with amplified feelings towards people? Essentially, one of the biggest problems caused by this is general confusion. In terms of the romantic context, I will recommend it again, Pepsol. Facing Love Addiction. This book isn't just about love, it's about the projective dynamics of what's happening when you have high emotions that are layered towards other people. It's when you're overly launching emotions. I recommend that book, honestly. Go for it. I see Nicole saying, advice about healing from a breakup or divorce. Again, what kind of breakup? What kind of divorce? You mentioned two things there. I think you might be talking about divorce, which is why you mentioned it. If you're talking about a divorce, then there must have been a marriage. The marriage is usually at least a year, but it could have been 20 years. If it's a case that you're going through a breakup or a divorce with someone who you've been with for 5, 10, 15, 20 years and you haven't had children, that's one thing. If you do have children together, that's another thing. Are you going to be co-parenting? Are you going to be seeing this person in the future? If you ask me a specific question, I will be able to give way more specific advice. If you say, what's your advice? This is this is me learning. This is me learning in real time. In a conversation like this, I think for the future, and the way to make this an even better experience for you as a viewer, as a listener, is if I answer questions that are hyper-specific, I can give more hyper-specific responses, and you can fill in the gaps in between. So for example, if I knew the question was, what is your advice for getting over a divorce with someone who I've been in an 8-year relationship with, we have 2 young children, and there's a history of verbal abuse, and there's a situation where we've got a blended family unit and our finances are tied together, and now we've been separated for 19 months, but I've still got romantic fantasy feelings, and also I noticed this jealousy. Obviously, it's getting way too specific, but the more details that come in, the more I see you as an individual, and the more I can then give back in terms of individual advice. Otherwise, I have to keep it broad. That's just one example. Or what's your advice for getting over a breakup? I'm 22. I've just gotten through a breakup with my first ever girlfriend. We were together for 1 year. They were my third sexual partner, and I can't get over them. And I tried dating someone new, but I just can't get over them. What's your advice, Jordan? Completely different context. Frustratingly so. But we're trying to aim for more advanced conversations on this channel, so the more private questions are better. New Life Bitch says, I wish I could afford private coaching with you. Gonna have to give up some luxury and start saving. Well, if you'd like private coaching with me, you don't need to spend £7,400, which is my mentorship rate. You can see the link in the description. My 4-month mentorships are £7,400. For 90% of that being cut off, you can join me in the Shadow Work Library, which is £750, and that is our group community space. There's a 110 video curriculum in there, and a new active community where we're doing live Sunday seminars. It's group coaching, it's 90-minute live Sunday seminars. We've got voice messaging backwards and forwards, and it's not just me. You also get access to other inner workers and pretty conscious individuals who will answer your posts and the feedback forum, the group chat. It's a 10 for the price. If you can't work with me one-to-one, but you do want to work with me and finance is the only barrier, consider getting involved in the Shadow Work Library. $750 top rate. If you click the link in the description, you can get another £75 off that with the 6-book study guide that I've been promoting over the last 3 weeks. It's my way of making things accessible. Why do I charge so much in terms of my one-to-one work? I only work with a maximum of 20 people at once. Not once. Imagine that. 20 people per year. 20 people at once, that's classic therapy model. I don't do that. I work with like 5 to 6 people at once, really deep, 4 months, 4 days per week, unbroken, very intense. That's not for most people, but the Shadow Work Library might be. So if you want to get involved with me personally, you can get involved with me collectively at the same time. That is a fraction of the cost, and it's popping off right now in the Shadow Work Library. We've had dozens of new students this month. Cool. Let's go back in. Looking at the chat if you're wondering what I'm doing. The death of a relationship is also the death of a dream. Very poetically put. Nitim Panwa. The death of a relationship is also the death of a dream. How do you get over somebody whom you've dated for 3 months and I was in absolute love, but now we are not together? Should I talk to them? Fantastic question. I can respond to that. You're saying that the death of a relationship is the death of a dream. You're already self-aware that you have overly fantasized the possibility of what you could get from them or what the two of you could be together. How do you get over that? Well, fundamentally, you have to accept, I think as you've accepted already, that it was a dream and it wasn't rooted in reality. You have to get the pin, pop your own fantasy bubble, and you have to let it pop and let it deflate. And maybe you'll find that when that balloon's there, you can rip it open, and inside of that balloon, there was something tangible, something real. There's maybe a real chunk of gold. There's maybe some silver coins, maybe some copper pebbles, but there's a certain material quality of wealth inside of the inflated vision. My advice for you, metaphorically and practically, is if you've had this 3-month inflation, pop it and let it die, let it fully die. Open it up, surgically speaking, cut open that rubber balloon, see what real value was in there, and then know that if you're not going to go into that relationship with that particular person again, at least you have the qualities that you're going to look for in the next relationship, and you need not wrap them up in a balloon and send them to the sky. Just hold on to that which you can hold on with your hand. That's the real stuff. There's a certain quality that you like in them, a certain way that they are, maybe even things like physical traits or family situations. That's what you know is good for the next time. And ultimately it's self-confidence and self-belief that unless you're 80 years old and asking me this question, you've got many more years ahead. Be patient. Practically speaking, if you still love them, if you still can't get them out your mind, as I recommended in the last live stream, this is something really practical that you can do. I'm repeating myself. If you watched the live stream 2 days ago, this is a repetition, but I'm repeating it for good reason. If you can't get over an ex and they keep entering your mind, the way to stop the fantasy projection is to let it play out to completion, and eventually it will fall flat and be done. When they enter your mind, don't try and stuff it down, don't try and distract yourself, don't pull out your phone and start watching Jordan Thornton Inner Work. Don't do that. Say a prayer of love and intention and let it go to full completion. Enters your mind, you're out on a walk. Ah, my dear ex, I love you so much. So sad it didn't work out. I still kind of want you. I hope you're well. Genuinely wish you all the best. Amen. And then you go about the rest of your walk. You're in the office, you're typing an email. Someone comes up to ask you a question, suddenly you've switched tasks. In that gap, suddenly, in the middle of the workday, 10:30 a.m., you think about them. Ah, my dear ex, you're so damn sexy. I love the way that we connected physically. I love the way that you did that thing with me. Ah, I miss you. I miss that. I want some of that right now. I know it can't happen. Thinking of you. I wish you well. Amen. Amen. The done moment. You don't need to say amen if you don't like that word. Just, I'm giving you a framework. I'm giving you an intentional framework that I see work with clients behind the scenes. Let it reach its full completion. Be honest and don't fragment against yourself. Your healing timeline will go from this to being condensed down to a much shorter period of weeks and months if you're fully honest with the full expression of the feeling privately in your own heart and your own mind, rather than trying to stuff it back down. Because if you stuff it back down, it's going to come back up. Doing whatever way you want to. Some people would say this is awful advice. They say you need to demonize them. Fuck them. They're so-and-so. I didn't like them anyway. They're ugly anyway. To some degree, maybe some of that to balance out your projection. But if you have a genuine heart-based love for someone, a genuine love, that love seeks a bit more completion because you've cut the rope. So just let it go that way. I'm going to go back into the chat. Saw some good questions coming in. Heather says, I thought I'd all healed up. The abuse received from him was him acting repulse. Not a question. Looking for a question now. I appreciate how engaged the chat is. I appreciate people talking to each other and giving support to each other as well. It's difficult when I've got such a large audience to respond to everyone, but let's try and do the best that we can for this final 10 minutes or so. Advice for a mid-20s male dealing with approach avoidance and abandonment anxiety born out of adverse childhood circumstances. Great question. Thank you for being specific. A mid-20s male who's got approach avoidance because of abandonment anxiety and adverse childhood experiences. If you're a mid-20s male and you were my client, I'd say you don't have a fucking choice. It's time to get stronger. If you're a mid-50s woman and you're asking me this question, I wouldn't speak in that same way. Maybe that's me being stereotyped. If you're a mid-20s male, you don't have a fucking choice. No one's going to save you. No one is going to save you from that difficult experience in the past. No one's going to encourage you to go and get your dating life to the level that you wanted to get but you. There's plenty of resources online. There's plenty of ways to go about dating and approaching and social network building. This is on you. There's two lanes within this. There's the outer work aspect of connecting with the kinds of people you want to be connected with, and there's the inner work aspect of the trauma healing. My practical advice for you, this particular person who asked me the question, read all three of these books. Read all three of them. Assertively, aggressively, with intention. Heal the problems of the past. And then do the same thing in your dating life. Fundamentally, a man who's forced into an anxious abandonment situation, although there is nuance from the therapeutic perspective of being loving and being compassionate and doing all of the genuine therapeutic work, that's all true. That's all true. But also from a societal perspective, as a mid-20s man, that does not matter in the dating market. I'm just being honest with you. It doesn't matter. One of the big mistakes that I see of younger men who are doing trauma healing work is that they think because they've healed their trauma and just by virtue of reading the books and being really soft and really sensitive, that that's going to allow them to then make a connection with the woman. But then this is where it misses. They haven't got a good social media presence, they haven't got a good physical presence, and they don't have the actual psychological presence to connect with people externally. There's three factors that are weak. They're focused so much on the inner world that they've almost become a bit too hermity. They're a bit too intelligent, a bit too soft, a bit too sensitive. That's fine. It's all great. Once you've done that, you need to balance out genuinely with outer world oriented, how to form better relationships and how to build yourself out in terms of higher value across the board. This might be controversial advice. I see it as incredibly common sense practical advice. Men in their 20s have it very tough. Men and women and across life have it all very tough. Someone asked me this question from their mid-20s. You just, you have to do it all. Put in the work for about 5 years and bet on your 30s is what I'm going to say. Genuinely, it gets much easier in your 30s to date higher quality people if you've healed your trauma and you've built outer relationship skills. Practical advice. I hope that helps. Again, I'd give very different advice to someone in a different circumstance. I'd also speak differently, with a different tone and a different level of aggression. So, just take it. I see Nick in the chat. I consciously came to this conclusion to deal with feelings towards my ex, and it helped tremendously. Fantastic. I'm glad to hear it. Justin says, could a couple go through your course to learn together? Justin, could a couple go through the Shadowwork Library to learn together? Yes, I've actually got a couple inside the Shadowwork Library who showed up together on one of the live stream calls just the other week, and it was fantastic to see the two of them both healing their shadows. It is very much encouraged. There's some things that we need to talk about in terms of showing up for the live calls, in terms of like individual entry to a classroom versus collective entry, but in terms of the course itself, yeah, go for it. I think it's good and very healing for both of you to go through a Shadowwork Library course together. I recommend it. Let me know if you want any more details, just message me on IG. Looking at the chat. Some great conversation in here. Kenneth says, you will also realize as you get into your late 20s that women will actually start approaching you. I was approached at the casino by multiple women last night. Yeah, for the young man who asked that question about being in mid-20s and kind of improving their dating life, that's a very common experience that Kenneth's talking about. As you get into your late 20s, kind of mid-30s, if you're a man on mission and you've healed your trauma and you've also created a good outer world kind of lifestyle, the tables start to flip, especially if you've had no success in your teenage life, no success in your early 20s. It's a generally common pattern that men tend to come into their power when they're in their 30s if you make a mindful move. So Kenneth, thanks for backing me up there. Seeing in the chat from Marcus again, glad you're still here, my friend. Advice for someone who lacks belief that they can bond with another in their current environment due to cultural and spiritual differences. If you lack belief that they can bond with someone due to cultural and spiritual differences. Marcus, my friend, are you asking about lacking belief to bond with someone, or are you just afraid to accept the truth that it's impossible? That's a tough question. How can you bond with someone? Is it belief? Is it belief that you can bond with someone? I'm trying to process a lot very quickly. The energy I get from behind your question is sometimes you know the truth at the heart level or the body level, even if the rational mind might resist. If you're thinking of a particular person that you're struggling to bond with, no amount of belief is going to be able to make you bond with that person. You either will or you won't. I wish it wasn't that brutal. I wish it wasn't that brutal. You either will bond with them or you won't bond with them. You can go on this massively convoluted transformational journey in the possibility of bonding with someone, but if it's not naturally happening, don't force it. It's probably not meant to happen. I might have misunderstood your question, but that's a general bit of advice cutting right to the core right there. Hopefully that helps. It's tough. Jordan, advice for a mid-30s woman who's married to a mid-40s man for 7 years. He is very repressed in anything sensual and sexual, and we have a mismatched libido. Okay, good question. For someone who's in the mid-30s, dating someone who's a little bit older, who's in their mid-40s, it could be the case that he has testosterone challenges. Most men, when they get into their 40s, they have low testosterone, which changes their libido. Could be the case that he's got unfulfilling work. Men who are in their mid-40s, who have low libido, usually have been beaten down by work environments, so they haven't got much sexual charge available for them anymore. If he has a particularly stressful job, I'd focus on that. If he's yet to do trauma work and he hasn't looked into the potential abuses, particularly in regards to the mother wound or any kind of shaming narratives around sexuality, I'd encourage that. If it's his issue in terms of not being close to you or not having the romantic spark, and there's been a historic pattern of, I don't know, things don't go forwards, that could be on him. To flip it around, also at the same time, own your share of the shadow. It could be the case that there are things that you're doing that are unattractive to him, things that you're doing that are destroying the relationship intimacy, things that you're not doing that could improve the relationship intimacy. On both sides of the spectrum, from practical biological, get his testosterone levels checked if he wants to, if he's, you know, collaborating with this. Do the trauma work from the past, but also in terms of the work that's available to you practically, just be honest with yourself about the areas that you could likewise bring more to the relationship to inspire his desire to be more sexual with you. That could be practical things. I don't know you personally, but it could be physical things like being overweight or underweight. It could be in terms of grooming regimes. It could be in terms of the energetics at a more deeper and more meaningful level. Are you stressed or anxious or unavailable? How could you be more desirable to him? Again, generalized advice. It's not all your responsibility, it's not all his responsibility. An ideal conscious relationship is you're both putting in the work and both making extra effort to be more desirable to the other person based on your commitment together. So bring this conversation into the open. See what can be done. I hope that helps. Loving the conversations coming through in the chat, seeing people respond to each other. Marcus, I see you saying thank you. Trying to find another question from Cynical. Maybe we'll call this one of the last questions. To what extent do you think it's fair to protect our energy? I have a close relationship that I'm considering ending as the energy is too negative despite their attempts to improve. I think that's very fair. We spoke about this about 40 minutes ago. Sometimes you just know that you've moved beyond a certain relationship and it's time to let it die. Just be confident. If you already know, you already know. Don't drag it out. I see, is it unethical for me to continue dating someone on a lower conscious level, almost like a pet? I know he is more simple-minded, but he is sweet and likes me. What do people think in the chat? Let's make this a chat question. Is it unethical to date someone who is at a lower level of consciousness as you if you think of them like a pet? It's a very particular word. Get involved in the chat. Yes, it's unethical to date someone who's at a lower level of consciousness, that you have this master-pet dynamic, or no, there's a different perspective. Maybe they can raise their consciousness, maybe there's something about it which isn't so difficult, especially if they're happy. If they're happy in the relationship, I see in the chat coming through, yes, you have no respect for them. That's a pretty powerful insight from Paul. It's unethical because you have no respect for them. I see Rachel saying, are you using them? Good question. Katja says no, as long as you see him as equal in other ways which equal balance. Nick says it's already over thinking of your partner as a pet. Lakewood says if you're viewing your partner as a pet or child, then I agree that it is. Initiate says if you're both happy, it's probably fine. Annabelle says pet question mark, huh, question mark. Cynical says unethical for yourself and them, it doesn't sound like it will flourish. Sound says not a question of ethics, more like if you believe it's the right fit. Jamie says I was in a relationship with a man who used that term, it is unethical. Strong statement. Cynical says no room for growth. Mike says thinking of them as a pet isn't healthy. Like a pet insofar as they are simple-minded, not like I own them. That's the same question as saying they don't own them. And then it's unhealthy. Someone else said good boy. Woof woof, good boy. Someone said it's giving predatory behavior or even infantile behavior. Topic of pet. Why pet versus care? Depends on the age. Very respectful sarcasm. Neither of you will grow, so not great. And someone else says, is there respect? It doesn't sound like a healthy dynamic. I think the community has spoken. The collective consensus there is that it's probably not a good idea to be in a relationship with someone who you refer to as a pet. But also I saw that the clarification came through there of them being more simple-minded. It's on you. We had a little community feedback moment there. Nitin says eventually this will turn out as master-slave dynamics, which goes back to the BDSM conversation. Maybe you want to put them in a cage, put their ears on, give them a ball gag, and they can only come out the cage for 1 hour a day to go and defecate in the garden in front of the neighbours. And you can just have an extremely, I don't know, dark side of Los Angeles kind of relationship. It's on you. That's on you. I don't think that's the best idea, but that's on you. Just take it to the full. Here we go. But we do have a DS dynamic, and I am the sub. Wow, it gets even more complex. Even more complex. Isn't that interesting? Mr. Dan says, what are for you the most powerful books on how to be masculine and how to be in a relationship from a healthy psychological view? Mr. Dan, it's King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. That is the foundational book on masculine psychology. If you've already read that one, then my recommendation is to have a consistent gym routine and work that you love and enjoy and you're good at. There's only one book that you need to read, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, and then getting your fitness in check and getting your career in check and having the inner feeling of coherence and authenticity and power with your physical body and with your work and career. For most men, that is the two fundamental pillars of strong masculine identity. What I do and what I am. This is what I am. That is what I do. Super, super basic, but it doesn't need to get overly complex with lots and lots of books. Although, that is the masculine and feminine shelf, so I could have technically recommended probably like 20 different books right there, but I don't feel like it's appropriate just now. Cool. I'm seeing a lot of conversation in the chat about the pet dynamics, which is kind of fun, but we'll move on to a final thing. Yeah, candle's going down. I've got just this much time left. What shall we do? For the final few minutes, does anyone have any questions for me? What would you like me to talk about? The name of the book, excuse me, is The King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. Classic of mythopedic men's work. And I see €5 in the chat from Initiate. Thank you. Please do more lives. This is great. Thank you. Thank you. I will put that as well to the next book. I see that Daniel's pointing to a good question from Heather above. Heather, I'm going to come back to your question. Let's see if I can find it in the chat. Let's have a look. Can't see your question just yet. Heather, if you had the question that's being promoted, then please do let me know. Sorry if I didn't see your question earlier on, Heather. I can see a lot of coming up here. Heather shared a lot earlier on, and Heather, if you're still here, I appreciate you being in the chat, but it's quite messy for me to go back and be able to, just from how many comments coming in, so it's difficult to balance things. Heather, if you're still here, yes, how do I get over it? Okay, how do you get over the dynamic in particular? I know. So Heather's, if you're watching the live replay, you might not see what's going on here. There's a lot of comments coming through in the chat, so I'm trying to lock in on what Heather said so we can finish on her question. Heather, if you're still here, and I see that you are, can you ask the question again? I've seen the context, but can you bring it in so I can then bring it out for the people that are here? And then answer in more particular detail, how to get over what in particular, the abusive dynamic, or... Please do tell me. I apologize, it's juggling various things at once on a live stream. There's a lot coming in here. Me trying to be responsive, and the conversation is wonderfully varied, so excuse me if I'm a little bit flat on the entertainment side of things. I see from Lonely K, I'm doing lower body exercises. Welcome back, my friend. How do you handle the sexual frustration or lack of sexual connection during the process of inner work when you're single? You just get stronger. If you're a man who's doing semen retention and you're asking me, like, how do you hold the charge after 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, just get stronger. Understand that you have so much power ahead of you. You've got much better things to be doing. It's a complex issue, but my simple answer is just learn to hold the pressure and grow stronger under that pressure. Be the coal that turns to a diamond by the pressure mounting onto you, and see what happens. It's an initiation. Either you will initiate and you will pass through the threshold, or you will succumb and you'll need to go and watch pornography and ejaculate because you can't yet hold the pressure. You're not yet strong enough. That's okay. It took me many years. I'm not shaming anyone. It took me like 4 or 5 years to figure out how to build up to the current 5-year semen retention journey that I'm on. It took many years. I used to get like 3 months in, 5 months in, and boom, regression, relapse. Just being honest, it's because I wasn't strong enough to hold the charge. So, yeah, there's practical things to do, but fundamentally it's about becoming a stronger man, ultimately. And I can make it more complex, but that is the simple thing. Let that inspire you. Let it be inspirational to be stronger. And just imagine how much more powerful you could be and what you could do with all that energy. Coming through on the chat, the final few things. I know I keep saying that, but it's enjoyable when there's so many people coming in. Sapora says, thank you very much for this live. I have a big question, but we'll have to save it for next time, Sapora. It's been good to see you here, and likewise, look forward to seeing you in the Shadowwork Library when the timing is right. We've got a call coming up in just about, 50 minutes. 50 minutes from now, we've got the next Shadowwork Library live seminar. Time has really flown by. I almost forgot. I forgot that I've got a call coming up, but that's the power of being present, I guess. I have got a class of about 30 people that I need to prepare for, which is fantastic. We've got some pre-submitted questions from some of the students. I believe there's 3 or 4 questions pre-submitted inside of the Shadowwork Library. We have a private community. People submit their questions week on week. Everyone's reading different books. There's a 36-book curriculum. People are doing their own self-paced education, and then we come together every Sunday to talk about the things that people care about. There's some pretty intense ones here, so yeah, that's what we're doing tonight. And I see New Life Bitch coming in the chat with a super chat for $4.99 American. I've now got the ability to buy 2 books from this whole live stream. I've made £16.62. That's 2 secondhand books. I appreciate it. But New Life Bitch said, thanks to all who weighed in on the pet dynamic. It was a way of conceptualizing someone on a lower rung consciously. You're a great group of people. Fantastic. Look at that. This community is fantastic. If you have the courage and confidence to bring out a question in this more or less anonymous space here, you might get some answers from other people, and we can all learn and progress a little bit faster and a little bit deeper together. That's exactly what we're doing inside the Shadowwork Library community. If you've seen me speaking about this every single week for the last 3 weeks, it's for good reason. I'm proud of the community that we've got built over there. It's growing every single week. It's still small enough for you to be able to have really personal connections with people. 4 months' time, it's going to be a bit bigger. It's going to be harder to form these personal one-to-one bonds if you don't start forming them now. Click the link in the description. Get your £75 off. It's £675 to join the library. I'm seeing Mike coming in. There's lots of money coming in right here. Mike just gave me £20. Mike, brother. I can't see any text on the chat. It's not coming up on my side. But if you said something, please copy paste it. I see the 20. I know you've been around for a while. That is £36.62. Coffee on me, Jordan. Mike, that's more than a coffee. £20 is more than a coffee. That's like 5 coffees. I'll buy a coffee. I'll tell you what. I'll buy 2 books and a coffee for 20 quid. I appreciate you, Mike. I appreciate, yeah, I don't know. I appreciate, I guess, the money flowing in today. Most that has ever been bought through on a YouTube live. I am immensely grateful. I've never... I think the previous most I've ever made in a single live stream was £5. We've got £36.62 according to the monitor on my side. I'm a wealthy man. Think how many books I can read. Think how many books I can get for £36. Happy man. Thank you everyone. If just for being here, not even just those who've given money, say thank you. Thank you for giving me your time. Your time over the last 2 hours nearly is worth more than £36. Collectively, and there's been a couple hundred people here on and off, and a couple thousand people will watch this on replay. I am immensely grateful for the work I get to do. It's very meaningful for me. This is just now a real-time moment as the live stream's wrapping up. If you're interested in who I am, I see a New Life Bitch. Let's get another super chat. Jordan is wonderful. He deserves more second-hand books. Being collectively. I see money magnet fire emoji from Casey Hodge. Maybe I'm a money manifester. I'm manifesting. And now Nick Bergstrom's. There's more money coming in. Thank you. Thank you genuinely. Nick's saying, I'm grateful for you and this community. It's beautiful and necessary. Brother, thank you. It's pretty nice, pretty nice. Yeah, I've never had a Patreon. I don't have any donation links. I've never had a donation link. I've never said, use this affiliate link. Have you ever noticed that on my channel? Every single book I recommend, when I've been recommending these books, I don't say my affiliate links in the description. Never done that on this channel. So a moment like this is quite novel for me. I see a lot of love in the chat. £40.62. I appreciate that. I really do. I feel very lucky to be able to share what I love and to inspire people like yourself to not only pay attention, but in this case, allow me to continue to do more of this. If you do want to come deeper with me, Shadowwork Library is where it's at. This has taken me 5 years to put together. My very best teaching and my highest quality consciousness is inside of my private community. I'm enjoying doing these live streams, but quite transparently, I suppose, as a Jordan update to wrap up the live stream. We're now at 88,000 subscribers on this channel. It's wonderful. I'm incredibly grateful. In 3 years, almost 3 years to the day, 88,000 from nothing. It is heartwarmingly beautiful. And yet, I haven't gotten back to all the YouTube comments that I normally get back to, even though it's Sunday and I go offline tonight. And I don't know if I'll get back to everyone. This is starting to happen more and more week on week. You might not realize it because I'm not putting up new videos on the main channel. But every single day for the last few months, I've been gaining about 100 subscribers per day on average, which is pretty cool because I've got 270 videos on the channel. I put things together where I have search term optimized, so people search for the anima, the animus, mother wound, father wound, they search for psychology books to read, and I show up on the YouTube feed. But 100 new people every single day, consistently, for about 3 or 4 months have been joining the channel, and occasionally a lot more when a video does well. And frustratingly and difficultly for me, I'll be honest, you can see my emotions, I've only got so many hours in a day. And kind of breaks my heart a little bit when I don't get to have the YouTube conversations that I used to get to have. You might notice if you've been a long time viewer, then I don't respond to your comments in quite the same level of detail and depth as maybe I did a year ago. I try and respond to everyone, and I do. I've left something like 14,000 comments on my own channel. But at this stage, 3 years deep, I literally haven't got the time and energy when I've got a full client load, and now a private community, and my Instagram inbox, and also doing these live streams and keeping the research going. So facing some new challenges as a leader and a teacher, and I wish I could, but I'm starting to accept that I've reached a certain level of scale where I just have to heart things and not comment in such great detail, which upsets me. You can tell. My best intermediary is to open up the Shadowwork Library and have a private community in there where we've got 52 members currently, and anyone who posts something I can read in full detail and respond in detail, and I message people over there as top priority just because it gets bigger and bigger. So thank you for being here, and I also saw another super chat coming through from Bogdan for $10. Appreciate everything you do. Thanks. Bogdan, thank you. I see 111 viewers in the chat as it went to 111 minutes on the live. 111 minutes on the live. 111 people watching live. And £48.63. Thank you. I'll wrap up on Jordan's lamentations of the successful person problems that I'm having. What you can expect from me this year in terms of the channel. I do want to be doing at least one weekly live stream and at least one main channel YouTube video, as well as 2 community posts per week. That's my idea. 4 things per week on YouTube. A live stream, a main video, and 2 community posts. At this stage, because I'm welcoming so many new students inside of the Shadowwork Library and I'm prioritizing their new student inductions, people leave long, thoughtful essays, and I respond and I read these things, and I'm in my email inbox, so I haven't been able to get the main videos out. I'm still going to be bringing videos out on this channel. I'm still going to be trying to do as much as I possibly can for free, and at this particular stage, also I see a new super chat coming in for $2.79 from Mindhack. Nothing. Thanks for your work. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I was saying just then, I'm currently focusing on live stream conversations because for me, transparently, this feels as connective as I want it to feel in doing my YouTube. it's very, very strange when you have hundreds of people commenting on your channel across all of your videos, not just my latest videos. People go back and they comment on videos from 2.5 years ago, and very meaningful comments, and I can't get back to them all. So I'm trying to figure something out, and I likewise only use Instagram and social media 3 days per week, so I can still create and teach and bring more into the world. Yeah. Alex said, I saw some of the comments sometimes which were not very kind, and you handled it very well. Alex, that starts to happen as well. If you don't know what happens as you get bigger as a YouTuber, you get more of everything, but also the negative comments come through more and more, especially when you have a big video. Yeah, people make a lot of projections and throw things your way. It doesn't really hit me too much. Oftentimes I'll just hide people from the channel, so if someone leaves a particularly ignorant comment, they just get banned from commenting. They won't know on their side. They're hidden from the channel. They can keep leaving comments, but no one else will see them. That's what I tend to do. Occasionally my shadow comes out a little bit more, and I'll leave kind of critical comment in return. I try not to do that because the energy that I put out will come back towards me, but if someone has greatly misunderstood or greatly projected towards me, I'll stand my ground just a little bit. And sometimes you can actually create a dialogue, and that's what I like to do, but sometimes people are just caught in their own projections, and they're not even seeing me for who I am. And I've been seeing the fact that I'm recommending these books for free. I'm giving you some of the best stuff, right? Just trying to give you 3 books for free. I'm not asking for affiliate links. I just want you to read the best books. It took me 5 years to find these 3 books to say effortlessly these are the best books on the topic. But that's it. I think we've reached the point where the live stream has come to a close. I can't think of anything else for me to share with you just yet. Apart from, if you want to be like 2 students who joined the Shadowwork Library last week, they were watching the live stream last Sunday. They clicked the link in the description and they were there for the call, which is starting in 39 minutes time. And they told me after the fact, I saw the live stream, got in on the call, and I'm glad to be here. So your choice. We're doing calls every single weekend. I'd love to see you there. It's where my prime consciousness is. Otherwise, thank you for being here with me on YouTube. Thank you for being here with the live. The candle is going off. I mean, technically, still quite a bit of candle left, but for the sake of your visual field, candle's fading. You know what, let's do something dramatic. Let's do a little ritual. At the end of one of the live streams, I ended with quiet, and I can see a lot of good chat coming through here. I see you. An amazing friend of mine, someone said, an amazing Kitaria music, an amazing friend of mine recommended your lives just now, so I decided to check it out. Can't wait to see more of them. I can't wait to see you here. See Annabelle Auntie saying, Toop, turn off our phones, throwback. Toop, T-O-O-P, we are the Turn Off Our Phones crew. Annika, super hug. Casey saying, blessings to all. Let's end this space with a bit of consciousness. I'm going to extinguish the candle. I'm going to extinguish the inner candle, but we're going to extinguish this candle after about 30 seconds of silence. I'm going to calm it down. I've been monologuing for almost 2 hours straight, trying to interact. Join me if you're watching the replay or watching this live. Let's take a present moment into your body with your breath. 30 seconds, just take a breath. Feels good. After speaking for 2 hours, let's take another breath. We're all doing the best we can. The sexual shadow is something which we often overlook. It looks different for everyone, but I hope from this live stream, and I hope from the books that you're about to read, through the work that you do this month and for the year ahead, you will be in the relationship that you deserve to be in. With yourself, with your lover. That's the power of this work. Once again, you can do this, but you need to professionalize your own self-healing. You need to take this seriously. Don't waste another year in a bad relationship. Don't waste another year dating the wrong kinds of people. Don't waste another year hating yourself unnecessarily. You can heal this. I want you to do this. And with this extinguishing of this candle, I will blow out the hesitation. And I will extinguish all of the cowardliness to not go into your sexual shadow, to look at it head on and extinguish the old pain. Integrate it into something new. A little bit of a moment, bit of a ritual moment, but that's what I'm going to do. Let's extinguish the cowardice, confront our sexual shadow, and get into the kinds of relationships that we deserve. Be well.